Hello, and welcome to another episode. Welcome to another episode of How to Be a Great GM. We're talking settings, and in this one, we're talking post-apocalyptic settings. And they're quite an interesting one because we don't often explore them. And when we do, well, they don't usually end well. So let's look at the post-apocalyptic setting. And we start off with, what are our expectations? Well, post-apocalyptic generally is set on this planet, on Earth. There's some kind of disaster that's taken place, whether it's an asteroid impact, aliens arriving, or nuclear destruction, or even just our polar ice caps melting, or perhaps it's Google shutting down. Whatever the cause, there is some kind of reason why the human race has simply stopped working. Modern day technology no longer functions. We don't have mass corporate communications. We don't even have mass communications. Cell phones don't work. GPSs don't work. There's no power in the electric sockets. There's no running water in the taps. Something has gone horribly wrong. So our expectation is, well, what has gone wrong? And it's a very important question for you to ask because it leads on to a whole bunch of other things which we're going to come to a little bit later. So we expect some kind of disaster to have taken place. Oh my gosh, it's the nuclear radiation, it's getting to me. So we expect that there has been something that has happened that has caused the human race to effectively shut down. On just what kind of scale, well, that's up to you. And we'll look a little bit more in terms of story as to how far it should go. So we expect some kind of disaster. We expect no easy access to water, except for one exception, but we'll come to that later. There's a lot that's going to come up later. Water is very scarce. There is no electricity, and if there is, it comes from some kind of diesel-powered generator or a wind turbine and is fairly erratic and certainly not reliable. There's no mass communications. Radio signals may be down or may not simply be working or have limited range. We expect a tribal kind of system to form. Humans forming groups of 20 or 30 people, which interestingly enough, I think it's interesting, is the natural size of the hunter-gatherers that still exist on Earth today. 30 people or so is enough to survive in a harsh environment, but not too big that you're going to starve out the area that you're in. So we expect a tribal mentality where we have these isolated little communities that are trying to survive. We expect to have to survive under some very harsh conditions. That seems to be the main motif of the post-apocalyptic or the apocalyptic world. We also expect to see modern technology hybridized into this weird kind of not future tech, but almost retro tech, where you're using a television as a fishbowl, or vehicles are no longer running, but they're being used to generate electricity. We're expecting to see technology used in a different way to how we would normally use it in our modern day lives. We're also expecting to see some kind of mutant, perhaps. Is it a mutant or is it just cannibals? Roving packs of madmen driven insane by whatever apocalyptic event happened that now feast on those that would be slow enough to be caught by them. In other words, feast on the players. So we're expecting a really harsh environment. We're also not expecting a lot of foliage. And the reason for this usually is a nuclear fallout or an asteroid impact. Now, history tells us rather macabrely that when human societies run out of foliage, and especially in the past when they ran out of trees, they literally turned to cannibalism, every single one, and that includes Native American Indians, the inhabitants of Easter Island, as well as inhabitants all over the Indian and Asian subcontinent and continent and in Africa. So humans, when we run out of vegetation, we just start to eat each other. Now, isn't that an interesting thought? So that is what we can expect from a post-apocalyptic world. Everything is difficult to come by. Everything is handmade or forged or reforged from existing materials. There is no mass industry. That's kind of what we expect. And of course, I'm sure you're thinking of a dozen different examples where that has all changed. But in the base, remember, our players are expecting something, and that's what I'd expect if I was a player. So let's look at what plots present themselves. Well, we've already kind of covered it, but just by looking at what we expect. We expect plots where we have to survive. We expect plots where we're running out of water, and if we don't get any soon, we're all dead. We need to go and find water. We expect plots where we're being raided by rival tribal factions who are after that one little light bulb that we have left that provides us light in the dark to frighten away those cannibal mutant pygmies. We expect plots where we are forced to adapt old technology or modern technology into some kind of new technology that will help us to survive. We expect very little in the way of help. We expect very little in the way of some kind of new technology being discovered, but we do expect a lot of scavenging, a lot of really, really hard kind of survival choices, and we expect a lot of death. There are very few post-apocalyptic movies, TV series, books, comics, narratives where death isn't a very, very real and very common feature. We also expect breeding, or the lack thereof. Now, breeding is an absolutely essential activity to do if we are to save the human race. Some people prefer to do it voluntarily, others prefer to do it involuntarily, if you like. So breeding and that whole idea of the balance between men and women is really important. Something that I find often quite interesting in post-apocalyptic movies is that women seem to be quite scarce once the nuclear blast has gone off. I'm not sure if that's perhaps because all of the radiation from standing in front of the microwaves while slaving over those stoves during their modern existence kind of prepped them for the nuclear blast or not. All sexism aside, it's just a trope that we use to say the men are randy and there are few women who are going to get raped, so we can have the obligatory rape sequence and reconciliation, blah, blah, blah. I digress. So breeding and the survival of the human species is definitely a plot that we're going to come across. And of course, what is the major plot? What is the singular plot throughout most of the movies and the books and the series that we come across? That is, of course, finding the nirvana, finding that valley that still has water, finding that piece of land in the middle of the ocean, finding that little speck of paradise that no one else has found, and that mysteriously the post-apocalyptic environment has not touched. That is almost always the goal of the story, finding that ultimate space. And if you look at almost any zombie movie, it's usually about finding that one safe harbor, which just miraculously doesn't have zombies in it. So those are the kind of stories that should be springing to mind. And obviously there are a whole bunch that come out of that. The kidnapping of the town elder who knows how to draw the water out of the pump, etc., etc., etc. But the ones I've covered now are the main ones that your players will be expecting to encounter, which means you can change them, alter them to make them your own. If we then look at the tone, tone is something that is already seeping through in everything that we've been discussing so far. Tone is about being gritty. It's about being harsh. Everything that you describe, jagged rocks, rusted spears of metal sticking out of the graveyard of vehicles, an unflinching sun baking down on you, chapped lips, burnt skin. The women are fierce and mostly Australian. Everyone's just because we're trying to survive. Gritty, harsh, everything's a struggle. Nothing should be easy. Even when you're trying to survive, it shouldn't be easy. You should have little moments of easiness where they come across a water tanker and it's still full of water that's pure and clean, and for a moment they can shower and wash away months worth of grime. And of course you then take it away by making sure that their body's floating in that water tanker. So whatever you do, your feeling, your tone should always be harsh, 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 harsh. And if you don't take it away repeatedly, the players will simply not feel it. So it should be harsh. However, having said that, you should also try and instill, because this is what a lot of these movies do, is that they try and instill a sense of ingenuity and the human spirit. Even though we've set off nuclear devices that have decimated 90% of the population and all of the foliage and all the dolphins out in the oceans, humans survive, and they will continue to survive. They are the cockroach of the world. They are the paladin of WoW. They will survive no matter what. So humans survive, and that is a tone that you need to bring in. Even though things die, you can offset the tragedy of death with the miracle of birth. You can offset the tragedy of their vehicle breaking down and stopping working with people once again returning to the horse and cart. Take that harsh environment, punish the players, and then let them find a pool of light that's generated by kids on bicycles. Whatever the case might be, ingenuity and the survival of the human spirit must come across as a tone. It also helps alleviate that darkness, and of course the brighter the spark, the darker it becomes when you take it away or snuff it out. So the post-apocalyptic setting, although it might not necessarily be the basis of a long-term campaign, I certainly think there's enough material there that you can explore different aspects, different items. And it comes back to that thing that I said we were going to come back to right at the beginning, if you follow me. The setting is determined by the event. What caused the apocalypse? What decimated the planet? And even if your apocalypse is set on another world with different sort of situations, what was it? If it was an alien invasion, are they still here? If they're still here, why are they not hunting down the remaining humans? Or are they? Is it then a survival? Is it post-apocalyptic, or is it more sci-fi? Bit of a grey area, really. I prefer my apocalypses to be fairly clean, fairly neutral, or evolutionary into science fiction games. So if the event, the critical event that caused the termination, an epoch event they call it, if that was an asteroid, where did it impact? Did it take out South Africa? Did it finally sink Britain below the waves? Did it smack in the middle of Russia? Who knows? You do, because you're the GM. And where you position that impact is going to be very important, because you might have Russian zombies that have been created by this asteroid that has alien microbes on it that infect the humans around them, turning them into these cannibalistic monster creatures. Or you might have South American cannibals, or whatever the case might be. So if your event was just an EM pulse from the sun, which just vaporized all of our technology, what's then happened? If it is a zombie attack, well, where are the zombies? And if they've all been destroyed, which would be an interesting twist on the zombie take after all, what finally destroyed them? And what now? So looking at what causes your apocalypse is critical to determining the plots, but it's very critical to determining the whole setting, the whole tone of the thing. You can also have it as a mystery event. So when we look at some books and some TV series and some shows, they sometimes keep the event so far in the past that people have forgotten what caused it. That's fine, but then just bear in mind that it won't have so much pressure on the players. If it was a nuclear event, the players are going to be expecting, oh, there's going to be areas where there is nuclear radiation everywhere. We're going to have to be careful about that. There are other areas that will be safe, but we've got to look out for nuclear radiation. If it was an asteroid impact, is there another asteroid on the way? That's something to really ratchet up the tension, isn't there? That one of them has a working telescope and that they see there is a second, bigger asteroid en route, or whatever the case might be. So by looking at the event, you determine really the entire course of your game. And the one game that I ran that was post-apocalyptic, I didn't really want it to feel too harsh. I wanted to feel like the humans were starting to come back. And I had said that an asteroid had smashed into the planet. The asteroid had brought some strange gas with it, which still lingered on the planet's surface and created these massive dead zones where the gas would collect, kill everything, and then with air currents drift away to somewhere else. Collect again, wipe everything else out, and move on. The moment my players started playing in the very first session, they were told they realized the gas is moving in a premeditated way, herding the remaining humans in certain directions. So the asteroid impact wasn't so important. What was important was, what the hell was this gas? Then you forget about the gas and you have all the other problems like surviving and water trading and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So the apocalyptic setting for me is very, very exciting. And if you look at the type of films that have been made based on the post-apocalyptic event, you immediately start with zombies. Zombies are always considered an apocalyptic event because they take over the planet really, really quickly. Now, there are a lot of TV series out there that talk about the zombie apocalypse and what humans do and don't do in the face of it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail there. If we look at longer term apocalypses, Mad Max from Australia is a fantastic example of that. The first one, not so much, it's a society that's in decay. The second and third, and the now remake, are real apocalyptic films. Water is the major problem. Gas seems to be in plentiful supply, but there's definitely tribes all over the place that have turned to a very Romanesque style of gladiatorial combat and survival of the strongest, domination of the powerful and that kind of thing. So Mad Max is a great example of post-apocalyptic technology that's modern day technology that's been converted into this new weird hybrid type stuff. Waterworld with good old Kevin, what's his name, Costner, was a disaster at the box office. You could say it sank. Is the exact opposite of the problem of water. Waterworld is literally a world that's been completely covered in water, and they are on a quest to find land. And of course, right at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, it's not worth watching, trust me, they find land. Wow, what a mind-blowing experience. Mad Max, they find water. Waterworld, they find land. The whole purpose of the film is exactly the same though. Tribal communities struggling to survive, trading in sand rather than in water. And then just finally, Soylent Green. I have to mention it. What a wonderful classic movie with Charlton Heston made in the 60s, where all is not what it seems. For you, the modern day viewer, the big reveal at the end of the movie, which had people throwing up in the seats, is not that scary in modern day standards, but it's still a good example of a society that's in decay and has no way of continuing to exist. It's not necessarily post-apocalyptic, but it is an apocalyptic type event which has caused them to start to recycle humans. Of course, TV series, you look at the 100, for example, very much a post-apocalyptic event and the trials and struggles that go along with it. Well, I hope that this has been helpful and will improve your post-apocalyptic games moving forward. As always, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and if you want to see more in this series of settings, let me know, and let me know what series we should look at. Until then, happy gaming.